Hello, and welcome to the Sovereign Collective podcast, where we bring you real, raw truth for your self-empowerment. I'm your host, Sasha Calavoda, and I believe that you can stand on your own 2 feet, but that you don't have to do it alone. I love learning from people who continually strive to raise the bar, to go against mainstream thinking, and who dare to question the general consensus. People who risk being ridiculed or even risk the loss of their professional status as they bravely question the common narratives and challenge the rest of us to expand our minds and to reconsider what we think we already know. Join me in learning how to take control of your health and your mind so that you can have the energy to think more clearly and the confidence to step up and take responsibility for all aspects of your life. We promise to never censor here because I believe you are strong enough to hear the real, raw truth to make up your own mind. If you like what you find here at the Sovereign Collective podcast, then please share with your friends and family. I so appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. And now, on to the show. Hello, everyone. Sasha here for another interview for the Sovereign Collective podcast, and I have a really special one for you today. We are live here in studio with Todd and David. They are on tour sharing the movie Epiphany, and they just got to town. And unfortunately, I can't go to the screening today, but they were generous enough to share their time with me today so that we could share the story a little bit more through the airwaves and different channels on the story of who knows what we're all going to hear about, but the true hope story, the tragic story of David Stephan and his family, his wife Colette and their son. It's got there's lies and cheating and corruption, and it's maddening and saddening, and so many different emotions run through this story. To be on the other side of it must be a real relief, and I couldn't imagine going through what you did through, what we went through. I did watch the original movie. The people versus
David and Colette Stephan.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
People, that what he said. Yeah. And watched that yesterday just for a refresher on the story that I heard years ago, and there have been some new developments since then. But I tell you go through all the emotions of anger and sadness and inspiration even. There's so many things and elements to this story, and you can't even believe it's real, happening right here in this province of Alberta through the media lies and the Alberta Health Services and even the RCMP, right? There's so many different factions implicated in creating a nightmare for this family, a family that's done so much for health and wellness for people all over the place. And I know, being in the health field, I know the product, I know how it's helped people. So there's so many aspects to this, and I'm a little bit excited, you can see, as I've got people here live in the studio. So thank you both for coming today. I just want to share whatever you think you want to share. We'll start with your story and your intros and go from there. And I'm going to cry. I'm just going to preface this with I'm probably going to cry today. So I've got tissue here because it's just a story that didn't need to go as far as it did. So, and I'm glad that you, Todd, are documenting this in a way that will hopefully be indelible and for people to hear years and years to come, if we're still here. Anyway, so thank you both. Go.
What would you like us to go with?
Well, let's start with you, because you're the director in creating these movies and why, and then we'll go into David and your story, and we'll just see what are you doing here together? Why? How did you guys connect? Why did you feel compelled to make movies about the story? And then we'll get into the story itself. How about that?
Yeah. Well, for me, I've been involved in filmmaking for about 20 years. I always wanted to make my own films. I always wanted them to be documentaries because I want to tell other people's stories. And but I also really into cinematography. I love being behind the camera in an artistic way. I love being in the edit suite. That's probably my favorite place to be. I do love going out and doing the cinematography, and I love sitting with people and hearing their stories and doing the interviews and yes, having them make me cry. That's something worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
But I also, I really wanted to tell stories that meant something and that could maybe push our society further ahead in a way, and that could expose what the corruption that is going on, because I think people really need to know about it. And if you can show it to them in a way that they understand and they can get behind, and especially with the people versus David and Colette Stephan, you could just see that, the media lies were there, and for everybody to see, because there was a court transcript. So we talking about what actually happened in court, and then what did CBC say. So it was easy to show people you know, the most kind of staunch person that would be, no, CBC is awesome, would see that, and they have seen that and walked away from it going, wow, they did not fare well in that film.
Right.
So, you know, if you're going to put so much time into something, and I do put a lot of time into these films, it must better be worthwhile, right? And
Yeah.
so that's where I'm coming from. And then just being guided by creator to put my feet where the footprints are laid out. And I was guided to David, and I just keep trying to stay with that vision, prayer, thanks, and let creator guide me to what I need to share and talk about with Canadians and the world.
And an important story to tell. Like it started so long ago. I just call it a witch hunt. There's been a witch hunt against your family from the beginning of, you know, the inception of True Hope and everything. So, David, where do you want to start? How did this tale begin?
How did the tale begin? Oh, wow. You know, that would take you back to the 70s when my grandfather took his life. And, you know, his family was devastated over the matter, but they were also devastated because mental health was already plaguing them, mental health conditions and severe ones at that. And so my mother, you know, coming out of that situation, was struggling for the better part of 10 years throughout the early 80s into the early 90s. And finally, through some stressful situations that actually were largely brought on by Revenue Canada.
Oh.
Which is, that's the backstory to the backstory to the backstory,
Right.
if you will, right?
Okay, yeah.
That could be a whole other documentary on its own, because it would become a national battle that would actually change how Canadians interface with the Canada Revenue Agency today. But that's a different story. So Revenue Canada came in and put us into an incredibly hard situation financially after my father had just sold a business and uprooted to really cater to my mom, who was going through some struggles at that time with her bipolar disorder. So we uprooted from Fort McMurray, where we were really well established, moved down to Southern Alberta, and it was a drastic change. We really, like, literally went from wealth, you know, riches to rags overnight.
Wow.
And so now we're in this situation, and my mother goes in January of 1994, which would be just over 6 months, or about 6 months after we had moved down to Southern Alberta. She went to the doctor to get help, and that's exactly what she was anticipating. She got a prescription for Prozac, and 3 weeks later she took her own life.
Wow.
It wouldn't be for another 10 years that the science would emerge that showed that the manufacturers of these SSRIs knew that these drugs were increasing the risk of suicide by 2 times or more, and Prozac in particular 8 to 12 times, depending on certain circumstances. And so proper screening should have been taking place. In fact, they shouldn't have been administering these medications in the first place. But if they were going to administer them, they should have been properly screening and understanding who would be a dangerous candidate to put on Prozac, who would be one of those, you know, that it would increase their risk of suicide by 8 to 12 times, versus one of those that it would just be, well, it's only 2 times the increased risk of suicide.
Or when you get doctors just giving out and they don't even know what they're giving out, right? Many doctors don't even know what the black box warning now for children on these things, right? So
exactly,
your mom's doctor is, yeah, try this.
Well, and here's the interesting thing about that is the particular doctor who prescribed it is known for saying Prozac should be put into the water supply. That's what, right? And nothing against that doctor other than ignorance prevails, right? But you know, this doctor obviously felt so strong about Prozac because of how he had been sold on it, right? I mean, these are just salesmen. They're glorified salesmen in white coats. And, you know, they're heavily educated, or I'm not going to say heavily educated, they're heavily indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And, you know, many of them are trying to do the best that they can, but they're just living in a fog. They don't know any better, right? So, and this particular doctor, nice guy, right? Family doctor in a small community, but he actually felt that Prozac should be in the water supply based on
unbelievable
how virtuous of a drug he thought it was.
So your dad was left as a single father of how many children?
there were 7 children under the roof at that time, 9 children total. Actually 10, because my mom and dad adopted my oldest sister, even though I barely saw her up until, later on in life because she was a fair bit older.
Okay.
And by the time that I was probably 4 or 5 years old, she was dealing with her own traumas and whatnot from coming out of a broken family. And so I didn't see a whole lot of her until my later adult years.
Wow. Okay. So your dad is left alone with you guys, and
He's struggling. He's struggling. He was a prominent businessman for my entire life. Always done well in business. We just sold the business. He'd sold it up in Fort McMurray, and he was getting reestablished when all of this was happening. And so it's really interesting to see him go from being this prominent businessman to having to resort to just take care of the family, to taking on maintenance jobs for the hospital and the old folks home and whatnot in our small town. So all of a sudden he's playing the role of a janitor when he was the owner just 6-7 months previous. He was the owner of the second largest property management business in all of Alberta, had his own private plane that he would fly around to Grand Prairie, to Lethbridge to deal with all these government contracts that he had. Now he's become, he's playing the role of somebody that would have worked for him, right? So he's taken on a very humble role at that point in time so that he could come home at lunch, right? And check on how all the kids are doing, that he would be there for us. And so he was doing this just momentarily through this particular chapter of life, and everybody's struggling. There's 7 of us under the roof at that particular time, and it was already rough before my mom had taken her life because of the mental health situations in our home.
Right. So you had siblings that are also severely impacted by mental health issues.
Absolutely. And I was just young enough. I hadn't hit puberty yet. And so those changes hadn't taken place because oftentimes mental health conditions will manifest at around that time or become far worse during and after puberty.
Yeah.
And so I had an older brother, or have an older brother, sorry, who is just 3 years older than me. And he had bipolar extremely bad. That's Joseph. And then my older sister, Autumn, who's 10 years older than me, she was moved out of the house by that point in time, married, and had just had a baby. And she was struggling, and she was on medications, and she was in and out of the psych wards. And so my father is just looking at this whole situation and realizing it's looking pretty hopeless at this point in time. So that's when he started looking. He exhausted everything available to him first and foremost within the medical system. And it wouldn't be till early 1995, after he had just finished up here in Calgary, actually, at the Foothills Hospital, he had just met with the head psychiatrist there. And he was left devastated when she finally, out of frustration, because he was just really pushing the envelope, saying, hey, look, there's got to be a better answer, right? These medications are not working. She finally was just straight with him, but she made him escort my brother Joseph and my stepmom at that point in time out the door. And then she laid into him and said, Mr. Stephan, you need a reality check. This is as good as it's going to get. And you need to face the reality that you may have to plan more funerals down the road.
Oh, my goodness.
These conditions don't go away over time. And she pulled out the DSM-4, opened up the bipolar, read its recurrent disorder. So she basically educated them in a very bold and blunt way. And so he left that meeting completely depressed and just in despair, because he realized that medicine, or modern medicine, if you want to call it that. I don't even call it medicine. Let's just,
No.
right? Let's, right? Yeah, petroleum-based, synthetic chemicals, whatever you want to call it.
Not the answer.
No, it was not the answer at all. And that was being acknowledged. That, hey, look, like we're treating it, kind of, if you want to call it that, but it's not going to get any better.
Side effects are horrible.
Yeah, we'll never have a normal life, and that's what was being conveyed. And so my father, he says that on that 2-hour drive home down to Southern Alberta, that he was probably far more depressed than Joe had ever been.
Wow.
And because he just realized his whole family's going to fall apart. He watched what happened with his wife of 22 years. He watched what happened with his father-in-law. Now he was watching it repeat with his children. And when would it end? At what point? And so,
and not only that, I mean, you guys were afraid of Joe in the house.
Oh, absolutely. It was volatile, incredibly volatile. Joe was not just mildly bipolar. He was homicidal, suicidal, basically the makeup of the next schoolyard shooting, constantly in and out of trouble, on arts or weapons charges with the RCMP. It was a really rough situation where there's a lot of violence involved. It was like hell.
And nobody else was doing well.
No,
Nobody else already inside the family was doing well.
Well, how could you be?
myself included, my younger siblings. It was just really rough. And so that's when my father in 1995 began to look elsewhere. He began to spend a lot of time in fasting and prayer out of desperation. He talked to a lot of people in the community. There was all sorts of stuff that people were recommending, and he was willing to try anything. So all of a sudden, Joe's doing magnetic therapy, and it's not working, but okay, my dad's trying. And then somebody's recommending something that Joe calls rust water. There was some kind of mineral solution that he was drinking. That wasn't
Drinking rust water.
there you go.
I thought that was your own pee.
Oh, no, not today.
So there's all sorts of stuff coming into the house. Copious amounts of flax oil. I don't know where my dad got it from, but they were in these little bottles. I think they're little Omega bottles. I don't know if anyways, little black plastic bottles, and they end up in the freezer to store for longevity because we end up with so much of the stuff. No idea where he got it from. And so Joe's trying that, and that's not working. And it's not that omega fatty acids don't have a therapeutic effect. It's just that we would learn later on that in order for omegas to actually have a full effect, you have to address other deficiencies first so that your body can adequately convert those.
Fair.
That's a bit of a different rabbit hole. So, because typically flax oil should have, or omega-3 should have some level of impact, but only when you have the coenzyme factors to facilitate conversion of them. So, the whole house is falling apart, but my father is just in desperation, just pleading and praying, looking for some kind of divine inspiration, if you will, that will lead to the restoration of our family. And something interesting happened in November of 1995. He's a property manager over 26 large buildings in Southern Alberta at this point in time. So he's not just working janitorial and sorry, he's also, because he's an engineer by trade, so he's also being the boiler room engineer in the hospital as well. So that's probably a little bit better pay than just a janitor, but not much. And so so at this point in time, he's now overseeing 26 large buildings in Southern Alberta. And he's spending a lot of time on the road traveling every day to make sure that everything is happening, as he's got a lot of employees underneath him. And he's meeting with a guy by the name of David Hardy. One day they're walking down a hallway in one of these large buildings and they're talking about replacing carpets. And my father is overcome with this impression. You need to tell David Hardy about what's happening at home, which is completely off topic. And my father honors that. He goes with it. He's okay. Go with the impression, and he did. And he just basically broke down and ended off the conversation with basically, if things don't change, we have no choice but to take Joe and institutionalize him, put him in a psych ward. And that's when David Hardy responded and just said, I've never dealt with mental illness. I have a large family like yours. In fact, it's actually a little bit larger, surprisingly. And he said, but they're all well. They're fine. I've never actually dealt with mental illness. He says, however, I've spent over 20 years in the animal feed industry, formulating feed for hogs across Western Canada and the Western United States. He says, we saw something commonplace in the hog pens called ear and tail biting syndrome, where the hogs had become irritable with each other. And they'd bite chunks of the ears and tails off each other. And if you didn't actually pen them away from each other, they'd kill each other. He says, we learned that you could completely eradicate that condition simply by putting the proper nutrition into their feed.
Right.
Now, my father had already tried a bunch of stuff up to that point, right? So, logically, it'd be like, okay, well, I guess maybe one more thing to try. We're already trying some nutritional stuff. The Tahitian noni juice is, going bad in the fridge because nobody's drinking it now or whatever, right? But my father had this, well, for lack of better terms, this epiphany moment.
That's how he described it.
Yeah. It was a light bulb moment. He's described it a number of different ways over the years. And at one point in time, he described it that it was just this resonance where he felt it from his head to his toes. It was a spiritual confirmation. He knew it was the answer. And it's a really good thing that he had that confirmation, because what would happen is him and David Hardy would go down to a health food store and pick up all of these nutritional products, because David Hardy had more of an understanding of nutrition. And so he was guiding them through the process, and they put Joe onto him like pretty immediately in November of 1995, and it didn't work. And so had he not had that confirmation, he would have been like, okay, check that off.
Right.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's when, we would really start to learn a lot about mineral supplementation and why it was being overlooked for its therapeutic effects. And the reason being is because the vast majority of the minerals that were being supplied, especially at that time, a lot of manufacturers are starting to incorporate this technology, if you will, which sounds kind of, scientific and not natural, but it actually, the technology is in a laboratory setting, taking the minerals and converting them into a form that is in line with the way nature supplies them, so that your body can actually utilize them. Most of the mineral supplements back then were basically coming in their raw form, right? And you don't go take a rock and grind it up and consume it and say, wow, look at all the mineral I got.
Right.
Well, look at all the mineral that just exited your system because it was the wrong form altogether. That's not what ends up in plants.
And that's smarts.
What's that?
That's smarts if it has to exit your system.
Well, yes.
You're eating rocks, I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes you will absorb some of it, and that's not actually a good thing, because that's when you can end up with, mineral buildup in the joints. You can end up with kidney stones. You can end up with those types of situations when you have the improper form of minerals in your system. So you actually don't want them absorbing, but some of them will.
Right.
Right.
So they keep on trying. And finally, by January of 1996, I believe it was January 18th, 1996, 4 products arrived from the States and they put Joe onto them. And it consisted of a colloidal mineral supplement. So that's far more bioavailable than your raw, elemental type minerals. There was a multivitamin mineral supplement, but it was a chelated multivitamin mineral supplement. So the minerals were actually somewhat bioavailable. And then there was a calcium, magnesium, phosphorus supplement that was also properly balanced and chelated. And then there was grapeseed extract. So these 4 products, they put them onto it, and within 5 days, Joe said it's like a fog lifted, and you can now see what was right and wrong. So here's this incredibly destructive individual who's just, wreaking havoc everywhere he goes. And, if you were to talk to him, he would say, the problem didn't reside with him. You're the problem.
Right.
And now he's able to look at it and say, wow, maybe that's not appropriate for me to be doing this type of, stuff. So his behavior started to change. And then within about 30 days, he'd stabilized enough that he would have no longer qualified for a diagnosis for bipolar disorder.
And how long?
Within 30 days.
30 days.
Oh,
that's crazy.
And at that same time, there was a bit of an argument. Maybe I should minimize it that way. There was an argument going on within our household mainly between my stepmom and my dad, because his lithium was running out right at that time as well. And my stepmom saying, we have to get him his prescription for lithium. We have to renew the prescription. And my dad's, no, we got the stuff. It's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. And so she eventually just went down and she filled that prescription. And then she came back and she had the bottle and she said, Tony, no, here you go. You do what you want with it. I'm going to just back off on this. And he still has that unopened prescription to this day of the medication that Joe would never have to take again.
Wow. Yeah. So
it runs out at the same time that he starts taking these supplements. So it's not even like it's a combination of medications and these supplements. He's gone off the lithium and he's fully onto these vitamins and minerals, and his life is transforming rapidly.
Wow. But I remember there were some inconsistencies later on in this, right? In the results.
You've done your research.
Oh, I remember this story. I do remember this story. Well, which was why you had to make the product, right?
That's exactly it. So there was no intention for this to become a business. My dad's getting these 4 products. It's worked for Joe. The story with Autumn is she doesn't want to try it. She's working with psychiatrists in Edmonton. And her main psychiatrist said, if you rock the boat and play around with your medications, you're going to die. So when she hears about this, she's not excited about the whole concept at all, and is actually, angry at my dad for the fact that he took Joe off of his medications. Well, it wouldn't be for another 30 days that she actually had to come stay with us, because when she wasn't in the psych ward, she had to be on 24-hour supervision because she was obsessing about killing herself and her 3-year-old son at different times. So she was completely unstable, even though she was on Haldol, Rivotril, Ativan, Cogentin, and Risperidol. She's on all 5 of those medications at once, And
Wow.
at best, it's leaving her in a sedated state,
Yeah.
but she's still prone to bouts of psychosis. And that's when it gets dangerous. And so she ends up coming to stay with us for a week because her husband had to work the night shift at a factory in Edmonton. So they met in Red Deer, and she got in with my dad and came down south. And about a day and a half into her stay, she went into a state of psychosis, and my father just said, "No, we're not doing this." And so he says he didn't force her; he just merely compelled her to take the supplements, and she got well. Now she didn't get well as fast as Joe because the complications of those medications.
So she was taking them both at the same time, the meds and the supplement?
And she became over medicated very quickly because her brain chemistry is normalizing. So what happens if you're taking an SSRI antidepressant that prevents the reuptake of serotonin, so you have more serotonin available for mood regulation, right? And what happens when you supply yourself with the proper nutrition that naturally incites the production of serotonin? Now you end up with way too much serotonin. And that's when things can actually get a little dicey.
Yeah.
You become over medicated. You start to have all sorts of side effects. And so she actually, having been through all of these things before, knew what it was like to be over medicated. So she actually, within a day or two, said, "Dad, I'm over medicated." And so they had to start, just within that 5-day period, they had to start removing her off the medications.
Wow.
And so she would leave, still on one medication out of the 5, and I'm not sure how they determined that.
He said he just felt it. He felt which one to do, and he said later he realized that was the one. Once, now that you guys know all the science around that, he realized he had let her stay on the one thing that absolutely she should have stayed on, or things would have been a train wreck.
Due to side effects from coming off of it, or because she just wasn't ready to?
Due to side effects and how it would have worked with the True Hope and all of this stuff, which they now understand very well and are teaching doctors about.
Right.
And if I had my way, we would stop talking about it now so that people would want to come see the film and get the whole story from the movie. But I'm just putting that out there, guys. You talk whatever you want.
But the film is real. I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen this one, but I saw the first one. Regardless of getting the story here, you put I don't know this one currently, but I know the other one, and you put it together so well. And when you put the visuals with the stories, with everything.
Sure, even if you know the story,
if you did, still go see the film.
Oh yeah, if you know the entire story, come see the film.
Oh yeah,
we tell the story in a succinct and fantastic way. And
absolutely.
Well, and my father is really a key piece of this particular film. And then another one of my sisters who's never interviewed before is also like my oldest sister that was just older than Autumn. And so there's actually some really interesting dynamics to this film with who is being interviewed and how the story is being covered, that even like I've lived it, I've seen it, but I really enjoy the film, even though I know the story, I thought pretty much inside and out, but to get these other perspectives in such an in-depth way,
right,
I find it quite enthralling myself.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to take just sidetrack here for a second.
Sean Buckley helps tell the story too.
Yep.
Oh, and he's in this one as well.
He is.
Yeah.
Because he's the lawyer.
Well, and he's a pretty integral part of even with you working against health candidates for access to supplements in general. Like you're on that path as well, right? There's so many things that you're doing to be a voice for Canadians and their capacity to access what we should have the very well right to access because we get to choose. Right?
Exactly.
Kind of crazy. So so you have a whole other story still with your wife and your child, but quickly, why wasn't the first movie enough?
Why wasn't? So we toured the People versus David and Colette Stephan last year. We went across the country with that and sort of talked about that, and whatever, they're kind of like town halls. People can bring up what they want to. Obviously, the movie kind of dictates what we're going to talk about, but we went across the country with that film last year, and people kept asking basically about the backstory. And so by the time we got to Ottawa, I was like, now I need to tell the backstory. I need to tell the story of the birth of True Hope. And how Health Canada has been battling this family forever, and their attack on David was just an extension of that.
Of course,
right?
Of course, they probably just couldn't. They were probably just salivating when there was some controversy around you and your family, right? After the history.
Yeah, well, it's really amazing. And so it's not just being vindictive.
Mhm.
They're actually using it to try, they're using this fantastic narrative. And when I say fantastic with a negative connotation, this incredible contrivance of how my son passed away that is fully dictated off of two main things: falsified autopsy report and CBC coming in and establishing this worldwide narrative that would, yeah, just take hold. And so they're using this narrative to try to remove Canadians' rights. And they did it throughout the court cases, 2016, 2019, and then the appeal in 2021. They've really done a great job at trying to set a precedent that was vaccine related, where as a parent, you could be held criminally liable if you chose not to vaccinate your children and something happened to your child. They didn't have to die. Just any harm or death occurring to something that they deem to be vaccine preventable. Boom.
No problem if they just inject your kid and something happens right then and there, right?
not
There's no accountability there, but if
Exactly.
you don't do it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you're highlighting the double standard.
Yeah.
And the double standard was so evident throughout the entirety of the court cases anyways, because my son ended up in an ill-equipped Alberta Health Services ambulance where they'd actually proactively removed the equipment, and he went 8.5 to 12 minutes without any oxygen whatsoever. And they're saying, oh, that didn't impact as to whether he would die or not,
How
right?
could they actually say that out loud? Like, how could anybody? That is what, like, this is the thing, guys. This gets so maddening because you didn't even know that at the time, right? You
No.
found that out later.
Yep. And
That
they tried to hide it. They tried to hide it, but because there was a paramedic in that ambulance at night that had a mental breakdown over the situation, it turns out that his mother-in-law was my mother's best friend growing up before she took her life.
no.
Word seemed to get out. And so all of a sudden we have this idea that something bad happened in the ambulance. Had that not happened, we may have never found it because it was not evident in the medical files. You didn't know what you're looking for. And interestingly, the forensic pathologist didn't even make mention of it as one of the potential factors as to what could have led up to Ezekiel's death. It was a nothing to see here, right? And so that's why they had to actually go down the road of bacterial meningitis and say it was bacterial meningitis, because then the compression of the brainstem would have already taken place due to such intracranial pressure, which would be, by the way, really uncomfortable for anybody going through that they would let you know. They would let you know by showing signs of discomfort at minimum. I mean, it would
Screaming and yelling.
right?
And he had no symptoms of
No,
that at all.
no. He had some muscle stiffness that you know, when we take a look back at it, once we realized and saw the medical files, is indicative of an electrolyte imbalance that was being corrected, that we were correcting, but then something happened. We don't know what it was, but something happened in relation to potassium levels going high, and that's why he likely needed the ambulance in the first place. And it's an easy correctable situation that they could have corrected had they been able to get an airway. So now they have to come up with this incredible narrative of bacterial meningitis to absolve themselves of responsibility, but then they're looking at it and saying, hey, look, we can, you know, make that a vaccine preventable version of bacterial meningitis that now we can set a precedent. So we see this buildup where they keep on using this false narrative for various agendas. And now when we look at going back to Health Canada is relying on the CBC narrative today and using the death of Ezekiel.
Still,
Yeah.
Exactly. Still. So
We highlight that in the new film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't want to give too much away.
Right.
Because it was something that just emerged over the last 2 years here.
Wow.
But they're still using that to erode our rights in Canada in relation to our access to natural health supplements. So it wasn't enough that they failed in trying to really establish this vaccine agenda through the death of my son Ezekiel, but they're also now moving forward with removing rights to natural health products from it.
Right. And being in that field for a long time, I'm very aware of what has been going on with that, and just the difficulty and the disappearance of certain things from the shelves, from Canadian shelves, because it's just too much of a pain in the ass to pay all the money and jump through the hoops to get the product there. So,
Exactly.
But the last ruling with the third or 3 court cases,
Yep.
like the last ruling was, it wasn't bacterial meningitis. He died because of it was like hypoxia, like that all came through? Is that not all documented? Is that not, how are they possibly using the lies to support any kind of argument that they have?
Well, they refer to CBC's narrative. They refer to it in Ottawa when they're pushing this.
Yep, they
As
actually
though that's the truth, and that is not the truth. And we show that in the People versus Stephen and Stephan, that's not the truth.
Clearly.
We've been to court twice now.
Wow.
Not counting screen.
You know, when we take a look at how all this has been guided, the timing of everything. So Todd reaches out, was that September 2022? I think it was.
Yeah, something like yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, we're going to a wedding in BC. So he comes out there and he interviews us while we're in BC, or interviews myself, and then he goes and the whole thing just takes on a life of its own that he wasn't anticipating, and he'd tell that story better.
Yeah.
But when we take a look at the timing of it, what's interesting is that Todd's ready to launch this docu-series that had our story initially threaded throughout the docu-series.
Oh,
So
okay.
it wasn't its own standalone film.
Right.
And at the time that you're launching it, Health Canada at that same time is now resurrecting the false narrative surrounding Ezekiel and using that to remove our rights to natural health products in Canada. And so the timing couldn't have been better. That CBC's resurrecting a lie. Meanwhile, the truth is finally coming out in a very profound way. And so now we have these tools to be able to combat their agenda, where people can see it and be like, wow, they're so to lunch. We need to make sure we take a stand for our rights here and not believe what they have to say.
Right. So crazy. And then there's even like the pathologist who wasn't even a doctor. Like, did that ever come through? And then there's the guy who dies in his car, like, and they say he committed suicide, but he's found burnt, and like, it's like, it's so crazy. So,
And I love it if we leave it at that. That is a teaser and a half. You were setting the hook for those people out there. That's awesome.
is that part of the new film as well?
That is not part of the new film. No,
Oh,
we got told so
okay.
succinctly in the last one that
Yes.
but it is a great. I mean, as honestly, this stuff as a filmmaker, it's a filmmaker's dream. Aside from all the sadness and the story wise, it's a filmmaker's dream. And if you wrote a dramatic feature and tried to sell it in Hollywood, they'd be like, nobody's going to believe that.
Exactly. Right. It is unbelievable. You're just watching this and just getting so freaking mad and crying. Like, I'm crying. I'm watching your wife just fall apart, hearing her story, how she almost committed suicide. Like, it's just almost unbearable at times, because you just see the wrong. And when you, like, I don't know, some people just don't seem to care about justice for some reason. I don't know what it is, but for me, it's just, I just want to get to the truth. That's why I did start this whole podcast. I don't care if I have to change my mind about something. I just want to know the truth, right? But a lot of people don't want to change their mind.
That's it. They do care about justice, and people love justice. And that's why People versus David Stephan did suck in a lot of people that were sort of on the other side of the fence, because they do want justice in their heart, right? If it messes with your identity, it can be tricky, and you can look for ways out. But if you look at like how CBC behaved in that, and then we have the court narrative, there's no denying it. And
right.
So I saw so many people come out of there going, holy cow, CBC's they're criminals. And so that's why that film was, I call it, I'm always trying to crossover films, trying to reach out to those people. I'm not just trying to sing to the choir, I'm trying to reach out to those people.
Well, and that's what I was going to say.
And that brought so many people over.
Right. So how do you
look at the corruption?
But a lot of people that I know about your story. They know about the films. They know about that. But a lot of people still watching CBC as their source of news have no idea that this is even touring. Like, how do you not sing to the choir? How do you get the people that don't know the truth? Because the people that know the truth are interested and want to support you. They want to be there. It
was interesting last night because people were coming and they were like, and I've seen this the whole tour in Spruce Grove. I saw it the night before. People are like, oh, I'll ask some people if we have time, how did you find out? And they'll be like, well, my friend told me to come, and so I've just come. I don't even really know what this is about. And that's the kind of stuff.
That is.
And I had two people actually in Spruce Grove, because it was $20 each up there for you, that ticket, not donation, $20. And this lady came and she was, well, I don't even know what this is about, and I don't even know if I want to support this. And I was like, well, then just go and watch. Don't give me any money. If you want, if you like it, I would be awesome to support it, because it costs a lot of money to make this film.
Of course.
But if you didn't like it, like, just go home and say, I didn't like that film. And she came out at the end. She paid for her and her friend And then she gave me $20 and bought a
That
DVD
makes
too.
me cry.
Right?
And that's so important. That's like this stuff. This is what makes me cry all the time. Because when I'm brutal. I always do this. It's just because when we can see when it's like just one person at a time, right? Because that is going to impact the next generation. This is the problem now. Like look what our kids are coming through right now. And we have to own ourselves and our health and the truth and stand up for what's right because we are living chaos for our children.
Well,
right?
I think to a certain extent it can be easier for that generation because with media and stuff, because so many people are starting to see through the joke that media is. And something like CBC, that they've been working on the backs of the giants of CBC who actually did tell good stories, who actually were honest people and who believed that CBC was the
Journalism
way to
is
get the
100%.
news out because they weren't sponsored by any farmer, they weren't sponsored by any, they could tell the stories. That was the idea of CBC. But then you've got someone like Justin Trudeau coming in and just giving them $1.2 billion. Now he's their daddy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you instill people like Catherine Tate as head of CBC, who lives in Manhattan, by the way, doesn't even live in Canada. And she must make a lot of money. And you instill someone like that, and now it's just corrupt to the core. And they've created that on the backs of really good journalists from the past.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
True journalism. You're not going to find it on the TV or on the regular media anymore,
Yeah.
right? You have to go look for it.
Yeah.
So you develop this product. Everybody, if you don't know about True Hope, if you don't know about EMP, they have an amino acid product. They have tell us all about. So let's go back to that quickly so we can share what you brought to the world as a result of the tragedy in your life.
Yeah,
your
so
mother.
kind of fast forward through it. So Autumn and Joe both get well. They both get medication free. They're doing great. And there's the inconsistencies in the 4 different products when it ends up in the University of Calgary for its first study. And everyone's getting better in the study. And then halfway throughout the study, everyone started to regress. And that's when the University of Calgary discovered that there was variances in relation to the levels of minerals in the colloidal mineral supplement. And so that's when we, my father and David Hardy would spend the next year trying to find a replacement that was adequate. And then they finally just said, hey, we have to develop our own product. And that's how, True Hope Empower Plus was birthed in 1998. And then it would get studied. And that's when, once the science started to come out on it, that's when the opposition would come out on it. And that's when we would see censorship, and that's when we would see things like what you see in the film with gun-drawn raid and seizures and at the border and suicides. And Health Canada really, really did it dirty to the Canadian public as they tried to push their pharmaceutical agenda through all this and remove us from being available here in Canada.
Like literally going to your center and raiding you at gunpoint, and you're selling supplements for mental health.
So it's sort of drug meth lab.
It's like raw milk farms being like raided, at gunpoint too. It's just, it's insanity. It's insanity. So, but it's out there now, right? And it's people know about it. It's on the store shelves.
It's actually licensed by Health Canada now. So what's interesting is you can go onto Health Canada's website right now.
Yeah.
And you can look on their main site, and you can find warnings about Empower Plus, where they're trying to deter Canadians from having it, and it's this bad product.
Yeah.
But then you can go to their natural product side of the website, and you can find that it's licensed and that they've granted us a claim of supporting mental and physical well-being. So it's like,
Yeah.
they can't get it straight.
No, well, they don't want to get it straight. I think confusion is a very powerful tool for people too, right? That is keep people confused, keep them afraid.
Yep.
They make bad decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And
Well,
they're easily controlled, as are unhealthy people.
Yes.
Exactly. And that goes back to the whole principle of justice. You're talking about confusion and all that. Justice demands truth. Without truth, you cannot have justice. They're fully interdependent on each other. And so when we take a look at this, we can say a lot of people don't like justice. No, it's just that they have a really diluted sense of justice because it's based off of the lies that they've been told.
Yes.
So, example, how many people were throwing it out there saying, about me and my wife, based on what they thought was the truth, what they thought was real, based on the media reporting, they're saying, hey, we need to reenact, the death penalty. You guys need to be hung, right?
Wow.
So they had a sense of justice. It's just that it was incredibly perverted because they didn't have the truth,
Wow.
right?
Right.
And on the tour last year, people did apologize to David in the Q&A afterwards for believing the CBT
Wow.
narrative.
Yep.
Wow. That's
Couple
amazing.
of naturopaths actually come to mind. Which is
Really?
yeah.
Well,
So the naturopaths were, see, and that's interesting. It's very revealing, this
Very
this
nice of them,
media.
though,
and-
very good of them to share
Yes,
that. That was
and that's an important thing, because not everybody will own up to that, right?
they
So
did.
Well, here's
Yeah.
the thing with the naturopaths. If you were to hone in on all of the little micro details that were happening in 2016 and how much was springboarding off of this wrongful conviction that me and my wife had, and how they were pushing this internationally, this was not Canada based. There was more consumption of the news story in the US than there was in Canada, because it was getting so prolific down there that basically
wow.
it was matching the population of Canada was what was being consumed down there. It was in Australia, it was in New Zealand, it was in I had somebody from Sweden reaching out to me and saying that they were, that they were aware of it in their local news, that type of thing. So when we take a look at what they were trying to use it for, they were trying to kill so many birds with one stone. And one of those was right after the wrongful conviction in 2016, they started to come after the naturopaths. And CBC, with their, I believe it's called Cross Country radio show, what they were doing is they were posing the question, should we, and this is on the heels of the wrongful conviction and all of those nasty stories about us, should we be licensing naturopaths in Canada? What do you think, Canadian public? Basically, like, so they were feeling they were basically generating the outcome that they were looking for, of taking people that had so much vitriol and anger because our son died and it had to do with us and a naturopath, rather than no, it had to do with an improperly stocked ambulance and improper care for something that would have been easily correctable, but they didn't have the equipment, so they ended up killing our son in their attempt to save his life, but they didn't have the equipment. So now you have people reaching out, and they're doing the phone calls in, right? Because it's a talk show, radio talk show, and they're trying to incite hatred towards the naturopathic doctors. So now all across Canada, every naturopathic doctor is becoming aware of us if they weren't aware of us, because there's questions about whether or not naturopaths are going to even be licensed in Canada anymore.
Never mind the direct harm that doctors cause every day as a major statistic, third leading cause of death, right? Let's just ignore all that and pick one story that's not even true, but it's so crazy. But we'll ignore all the harm that's being done every day in the regular system that everybody so for some reason trusts.
28,000 Canadians die every year of medical misadventure.
Yes.
28,000
but hold on. But I want to correct that though, because here's the thing.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, you have approximately 10,000 Canadians dying every year from properly prescribed medications.
Right.
And then, you have 28,000, about 30,000 every year dying from medical misadventure. So a total of about 40,000 Canadians dying every year from issues in relation to interfacing with the medical system.
Right.
In the US, it's literally 10 times that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those numbers are so far from being correct. So far from being correct, because they're underreporting. How often does a doctor actually note that the cause of death was due to issues with the medication? Right?
Yeah.
It's under
Like one of these.
Right, like one of the jabs, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
Yeah.
How often is a doctor going to want to report saying, yeah, I screwed up and as a result I killed this patient? No.
Right.
So we have those reported numbers, about 30,000 Canadians dying from medical misadventure, where they're messing up, malpractice, malintent, whatever you want to call it. And then you have 10,000 from medications that are being taken as prescribed, but those numbers are way low. So we have 40,000 that we know of, but it's likely double or even more than that. We're probably losing a small city every year in Canada due to the medical system.
And then we can throw Maid in there too.
Well, seriously, there's a movie for you. Are you going to do one on that? Holy moly.
I've discussed and looked at it. Yeah, it's not my time for it yet.
Not yet?
No.
Yeah, Kelsey Sharon, you connect with her. She's the big one talking about that. She's in Vancouver, I believe.
Okay.
And
there's a few people there
talking. She's the biggest one I know. But that's a whole other topic.
Well, it is, but it isn't. Here's the sick irony of it. right? We're out
Mhm.
here promoting health freedom. This is a health freedom tour,
Mhm.
trying to get people to rise up and make sure that we have access to natural health products that are life-saving. And the sick irony of the whole MAID concept is that the government is literally putting out millions of dollars every year, easily millions, that's a low number,
Mhm.
to facilitate people taking their lives,
Yeah.
right? To assist in them committing
Right.
suicide. But yet, on the flip side, they're putting out millions of dollars a year to prevent access to natural health products that would prevent you from ever even considering
Right.
suicide. So it's you see the picture that we're really living in a death cult.
We are living in a death cult, 100%. That's what it is. And people don't see it. And it's amazing because it's so freaking obvious. It's not when they're pushing you and trying to get minors into the MAID program at like it's a
Yeah,
death cult.
sure,
It's what it is. What else?
sure.
What do you call it?
Yeah, people don't, yeah, really want to look at the world like that. I think it's hard for them
It is,
to just
but
be
you know,
honest and
like
let's just call it, sure.
Yeah.
right. It's hard, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So what?
And that's
It's
fine.
the truth,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah,
it's what it is. It is what it is. And you actually were in jail, right?
I
You were in
was actually
jail
in jail.
for how long?
Just 3 weeks.
Just 3 weeks.
21
Just 3
days
weeks in
solitary.
solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement. But I heard that was in the film you say is actually whether they put you in solitary confinement or not, you was going to because it was to protect your life
It was
at
because
that point.
I never realized that the inmates had access to mainstream media, right? I'm ignorant. I don't know. So
Yeah.
they're watching CBC. And so now by the time I'm going to jail, I've been labeled as an unremorseful
Right.
baby killer. That doesn't jive well. There is a certain sense of perverted justice within
Yeah.
the jail system. So they would have taken it, the inmates would have taken it upon themselves to make sure that justice was served based on the perverted narrative that they had within themselves.
Yeah, they said so many times that you had no remorse. You medicated with maple syrup. Like, good God. Like, it's like people believe this stuff, though. Like, it's like you lost your child. Isn't that enough? And so, question now. So, this was years. How many years before that was finally put to bed? The whole with Ezekiel, the loss of Ezekiel, and going through courts and all that stuff.
When was that finally put to bed?
Like, how
They
long?
dropped
Yeah.
Yeah, they dropped the appeal.
Like 10 years, 9 years?
Oh, yeah. So it was from 2012,
Yeah.
early 2012, till we finally, everything was done by August of 2022. So it's just over 10 years.
10 years. So now you find out there's lies, there's corruption. Does anybody pay is anybody held accountable? Is anybody like making up for the horror that you had to live through?
Well,
Like
it would be fantastic. I mean, that would be justice because it cost me and my family well over $1 million. That's just direct costs for making sure that, like $35,000 right off the bat for transcripts, just to get into the appeal court so that we could undo the precedent that was set from the wrongful conviction. $35,000 for this transcript.
Many families couldn't afford to fight this.
well, of course
No.
not. Most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it literally cost us over $1 million over that 10-year period. And then when you compound that, loss of our son,
Yes.
wrongful death right there.
Yes.
Right? And it was criminal negligence on behalf of Alberta Health Services. It was. And Sean Buckley even says the same thing. It's
Yes.
actually a really clear-cut case of criminal negligence resulting in death. Somebody or a group of people should have been doing time from Alberta Health Services. So we have that. We have the, when you took a look at the hardship that our family had to endure,
Death threats.
the death threats, the public ridicule,
The impact on your children. Your
Yeah.
other children. He wasn't your only son.
exactly.
Right.
It's had a significant impact, and no, there's been nothing that's been done by the government to undo this, but instead they're now resurrecting the false narrative to try to remove all of Canadians' rights to access natural health products on a whole.
On like I don't know what to say. It's just like I was saying before. Fact difference between fact and fiction. Fiction has to make sense. Fact doesn't, and this does not make sense. There's no sense. Like how could there be no restitution for putting you through that so many times? Like how I don't understand how is there any potential for that? Or are you just going to leave that? Or are you going to look?
No, we were going down that road after we were acquitted in 2019. So I self-represented. Sean Buckley partially represented my wife, and then she had 2 other lawyers that partially represented her because it was on a moment's notice that they would have to attend this month-long trial, and nobody's got that kind of schedule open.
Right.
unless they're a really lousy lawyer and nobody's hiring them, right? But no, these were decent lawyers, right? Sean's a great lawyer, and so actually all of them were great lawyers, to be honest with you. And the reason why they were doing it is just because they saw the injustice. They saw it for what it was, the case, and so these three, they basically volunteered. Like they were charging less than 50% rate, and they were just filling in. They were watching me cross-examine to get sharpened up on how they would then come in and cross-examine after me. So that because they didn't have time to get up to speed on the trial. It was literally within a few days' notice that they came on board. And it was the judicial system that put us in that position, by the way, where they didn't grant us the time necessary for us to be able to get a lawyer for Colette, because Colette came to the realization I'm in no emotional condition to be able to represent myself.
Right.
And the Crown did it dirty this time. Before, everything equally applied to both of us, so it would have only taken representation from one. But now they segregated out the liability, and in 2019, and they were actually focusing in on Colette more than me, so that if we were, let's say we were found guilty, she would be liable for more jail time than I would have been liable for. And so there was elements that they were exclusively pointing at her so that I couldn't even represent on her behalf. So it was absolutely filthy what they were doing, the games they were playing. So the Crown and the judiciary were both working in on this, and they put us into this position. So with that taking place, we're acquitted, and we're ready to sue them. And we're ready to sue them on numerous levels. And the Crown then appeals. And so now it's all hung up. We're now waiting for appeal. We can't sue at this point. It's not going to go forward until we get determination. And the Alberta Appeals Court, Catherine Fraser, the Chief Justice of the Alberta Appeal Court, so she's a top judge in all of Alberta. She has the highest standing. She appoints herself to the case. So we're thinking, oh, they're taking this seriously. Well, they're taking it seriously, all right. They completely undid everything. They ordered a third trial. They dictated in there for the next trial judge what evidence should be weighed, which was to the exclusion of all of the exculpatory evidence that we had that helped us get that not guilty.
Yes.
So they're cutting off our defense at the knees. We're looking at it saying we're going to jail. Aside from a miracle, we're going to jail. We're going to jail. And they also resurrected with no evidence to rely on, no transcripts to rely on, no expert testimony to rely on. All of a sudden, these three Alberta Appeal Court justices determined that vaccines were a huge part of the death of my son, and they made the statement that had he been vaccinated, he would have almost certainly been alive today.
It's so unbelievable. Like how.
So now they're back to that after it's already been squashed.
They started it that way, and then they went off that way, and
shut
then
it down.
Yeah.
Through expert witness.
Yes.
And they didn't even want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And then somehow the appeal court justices put on their medical hats because they've got more expertise than medical experts, and they make determinations that are findings in fact in law and are precedential in nature, saying that basically taking vaccines and turning them into a necessary of life. So now, if you don't administer them, are you failing to provide the necessaries of life?
Right.
Which is up to 10 years in jail.
Like there had to be so many involved on the back end of that. It was obviously just an assault, an intention. There was a goal in the end, but it didn't take.
Well, if you want to go to matadorfilms.ca and watch People versus David and Stephan, you can find out what happens.
Exactly, and it's it's done so incredibly well.
Okay.
But basically, just to close up the whole idea about suing, we did want to sue, not because we feel that we are deficient in anything. I mean, we don't have our son, and there's nothing we can do to get him back.
No,
that's
right.
it.
Yeah.
But in relation to finance, through this experience, we learned that that's all fleeting anyways. So what? We have our family, we have what we need, we have food on the table, we have a nice, modest lifestyle, we grow a lot of our own food, we're involved in that type of stuff, and we just really enjoy life. So if we end up with $1 million, so what? Yes, would it be just? We already paid for that just to keep ourselves out of jail and to try to prevent that taking place. So yes, it would be just to get that money back.
Yeah.
But is that our motive? No.
No.
What we wanted to do is we wanted to sue to serve as a deterrent, to prevent them from abusing other parents, because we were the first trial of its kind in Canada. And then we saw other trials emerging where it was the same thing, where parents were being charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life, which were exclusively reserved for negligent parents in the past.
Right.
Like
Now-
abusive. parents.
Clearly, exactly. Right.
Now they were opening up the doorway that no, it's not about whether you're negligent or not. It's about choice of care. You failed to integrate with allopathy, and you favored homeopathy or naturopathy, or maybe it was Ayurvedic medicine
Yeah.
or Chinese traditional medicine,
Yeah.
whatever it is. They're saying because you didn't favor this first and foremost, this is the only thing that we recognize as and this is actually the terminology they used at the end after they got the wrongful conviction in 2016, the criminal code approved standard of care.
Wow.
Allopathy is
Wow.
the criminal code approved standard of care.
Wow.
And so we were going to sue to serve as a deterrent.
Yeah.
But they closed that door with the appeal court. And then everything fell apart and there was never a third trial because the miracle happened. So matadorfilms.ca, watch it.
Miracle, you go find that out. That's on the People versus David and Colette Stephan,
Correct.
the original documentary, not in the one that's touring. So you have to see both to get the whole picture there. But it's a story.
It's a story to
It's
have.
a crazy. It's unbelievable. But now that it's all behind you, you have no interest in rehashing and suing now.
No,
I mean, it's
and not unless it would serve as a deterrent to prevent them from these criminal activities. But the problem is that that appeal court made sure that they covered all of the elements that we were going to proceed with the lawsuit. So really, when you look at it, it was very well strategized, the appeal decision, that they knew all of the different areas that we could pursue in relation to lawsuits. And they made sure that they provided a false narrative by either omitting the evidence that we had supplied them in our factums. So they're like, in one instance, they omitted a full page of evidence that we had supplied them so as to come up with a false narrative about the judge being a racist. And yet we provide that.
too. I mean, if it's not anything else, it's got to be racism, right?
Yeah, because the judge found us not guilty. All of a sudden, he's a racist. And they upheld that. They hung that judge out to dry. They upheld that through omitting the evidence that we were supplying.
But there's basic rules about submitting evidence. There are basic procedures in law to how to do, like, so they're obviously, like, you can't just do that if
You
it's
can't.
done correctly.
Well,
like,
that's where the appeal courts come into play. So the next appeal court up above that is just the Supreme Court of Canada. So we actually did go to the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah.
In 2021, we put in our application, and that's when they rejected it in August of 2022. So that precedent is still standing there from the Alberta Appeal Court. That's really
amazing.
filthy, and it's just the whole thing is just it's fraudulent, is what it is. They twisted the truth, they omitted the truth to come to this conclusion, and it's so deliberate. When you read both factums, what the Crown, or it's all three factums, what the Crown supplied, what Colette supplied, and what I supplied, and you take a look at it, and you look at the totality of the evidence there, and then you read the written decision that they came out with, it has very little bearing or resemblance of what the facts were that were supplied to them.
So this is at the Canadian Supreme Court level?
No, this is at the Alberta.
Alberta. Oh, right. So the Alberta, but the Supreme Court, the Canadian is in your favor. Now we've got case law to support.
Well, so we won in 2018 at the Supreme Court of Canada. We went to them again in 2021, looking to have this Alberta Appeal Court decision undone, and that they rejected it. They only take about 10% of the cases that are applied for every year.
Oh.
And they decided that this one wasn't in the public interest, even though it was the most publicized case out of all of the cases that they have before them.
So that Alberta Supreme Court ruling still stands.
Yep.
Yeah. Good luck finding a good judge these days.
Seriously.
Really?
Good luck in Canada.
Yep.
Good luck finding a good judge, an honest judge. Good luck.
Yeah.
I don't know if they exist anymore.
We only ran into two out of all our 10 years of in and out of the courts. We ran into two who had integrity and were willing to actually take a stand, like going against the grain.
Are they still around? That's another thing. They're probably getting threatened and bribed, and you know,
one's been called a racist, and his career was completely slammed
because of that.
Because
of that,
he ruled in our favor. Yeah, his career basically done.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the other judge should be into retirement by now, but he was the one that opened the door so that we could go before the Supreme Court in 2018.
Whew. It's just too much to take sometimes. I couldn't imagine actually living it.
It's interesting because when I reached out to the RCMP to talk to them, get their side of the story
Yeah.
in Raymond, that
Yeah.
everybody who was involved in that had been transferred out, and the head guy, what would you call that guy? What's that?
The staff sergeant.
Yeah, he had retired a little bit early, it seemed.
Well,
Mhm.
there's a backstory to that
Yeah.
that is not in the People versus Dave and Colette, Stephan. In May of 2018, right as we were going to the Supreme Court, we started to release a lot of documents online, a lot,
Oh.
exposing the doctors and exposing the RCMP. We were actually hoping that they would proceed with homicide charges in relation to the
Oh.
death of my son, and not just in relation to Alberta Health Services not equipping the ambulance. There was other nefarious stuff that happened because they actually did get him to come back to life after they corrected the electrolyte imbalance, but then they used rocuronium bromide and overdosed him on that, and that's contraindicated for somebody that has an electrolyte imbalance, and they put him into cardiac arrest. And then we don't even know what happened, because there's over an hour worth of evidence that disappeared right after they did that, and there's no medical evidence there. You can't find it. It's like, oh, where did he disappear to for an hour? Did everyone go on coffee break
Right.
for an hour while he, like, there's
Supposed to be in a helicopter being transferred
Yeah.
to the.
Right.
There's no documentation. So actually, no, that was while he's in the hospital, because then it picked back up again when he's in the helicopter. So we were looking for homicide charges, and so we were submitting this evidence to the police, and they came back and said, any evidence that you supply to us, we're just going to throw into the garbage. But the problem is that they said it on recording.
Oh, they did.
We have the recording. So want to talk about obstructing justice?
Seriously, like there's so many people that should be held accountable. All this whole chain of events. It's just.
So this is May 2018,
wow.
right? And so now we start exposing a lot of this stuff. And interestingly, it was 1 month later that staff sergeant goes into early retirement, and all of a sudden other ones are the whole detachment just went bloop, like that. The whole detachment just got fragmented amongst other, yeah. So it was ironic that happened, that all of a sudden that detachment would be transferred, all these people be transferred out and whatnot that were part of this botched investigation.
Kind of sounds like the Catholic Church in certain instances.
How dare you? The Pope's body's still warm.
Well, there's some interesting stories around that too. Wow. And Raymond, it's funny because I have a friend who lives in Raymond, so I never used to know about Raymond, and she knows. She lives in the cul-de-sac that one of your brothers used to live in, actually.
Okay.
So she knows him quite well. So interesting. And so nobody's held accountable. Everybody can get away with lying, deleting evidence, yeah, everything, and it's okay.
Yep.
But here they are still rehashing. It's just, folks, if you don't see this now, like, share this interview with somebody who still believes in our systems. I don't know what it is, but people put the medical system on the pedestal. They're putting still the media on a pedestal. I don't understand. They have not earned it. It's religion. Yeah. And it is religion, and it's this scientism, and it's a spell. Right?
Absolutely.
People are under a spell. They are mind controlled. Yep. And it's just.
They also want to believe in the Canada that was promised years and years and years ago to the baby boomers. They want to believe in that Canada, and then they want to be taken care of in their old age, and they want to have a nice little life. And part of being here is suffering. And so open your eyes and just see where you're at and start living knowing that. Yeah, it'll be good for you. It'll be fine. You won't live in fear anymore.
Right. And that's the thing, like, that's got to be one thing going through this, like your strength. And you probably feel, I would think, not, God forbid that you have to go through anything else ever again like this, but you must feel that you can handle a lot, right? Like when we're challenged, we find out what we're made of and what we're capable of and our strengths. And, we're trying to give everybody a ribbon and everybody's okay and not offend anyone. And, but you got to be pretty strong coming through the other end of this.
Well, it definitely had a refining effect. There's no doubt about it. It put me to the test in all sorts of areas, including areas of integrity. Am I willing to actually take a stand for what I preach? Am I willing to stand with conviction, regardless of what the negative outcome would be for taking a bold stand? And that was a challenge that's well articulated within the People versus David and Stephan about the plea bargain that was initially
Right.
a plea bargain that I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to be talking about it legally right now, but a plea bargain
Oh,
that he came forward with, and it was a really fantastic deal. But I don't want to get into the details
Yeah.
because it's in the
yeah.
right. And if I was looking for the easy way out, that would have been it.
Yeah.
And it would have been significantly easier. Everything would have came to a close in 2016. I would have had a wrongful conviction based on me pleading guilty, but I would have never done jail time. And it wouldn't have cost us
Saved you a lot of money.
the over $1 million.
Right.
At that point
Yeah.
in time, I think we were only about $50,000-$60,000 deep into the whole thing.
Wow.
Right? So
Pennies
compared to what we ended
Yeah.
up spending.
Yeah.
It would have been a real easy way out. So there was things like that that really put me to the test. And eventually it gets to the point where, you're going through these hard times. You start to question, what am I actually here for? Right?
Yes.
What's the purpose? Is it for a life
Yes.
of ease? Because if it is, then I've somehow ended up on the wrong road. Right?
How did I screw it up?
But if it's not, then what am I to embrace? Right? Like, what am I supposed to be doing and to do so unwaveringly? And I've come to the place in my life where there's certain things that I'm not willing to compromise on. And I would rather put my head in a guillotine than compromise on certain matters that I would have before had maybe a sense of wavering, like, oh, but my children, but it's all these things, it's all those fears, like I should compromise because if I don't, then maybe I won't be there as much for my children or whatever. And what about them? And the problem is that when we sell ourselves out, what about our children?
Exactly.
You didn't just sell yourself out, you sold your children out as well.
Yeah. How many children do you have now?
4.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we have a 17-year-old son, 12-year-old son, 10-year-old son, 7-year-old daughter.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And now, okay, you guys are on tour. What's the goal with this tour, and how long does this last, and what's the plan? Is this what you're mostly like? Okay, first what are you doing now with what's the plan? You're going across the country, you're talking to groups, and what's the experience been like? And is there negatives to it, or is it all positive? What's the experience been like?
Well, we were hoping that there would be some level of negative in this sense with the media. We were hoping the mainstream media would pick up on it because the alternative media hasn't covered it near enough. This is
the rebel news, like they're not rebels at all.
Really?
Oh, they're conformists.
They're not covering it?
Actually, no, story time real quick.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, Rebel News did cover our story.
Oh, they did?
Right after the wrongful conviction in 2016. It was just a little about 5-minute simple segment. And you know what the takeaway was?
What?
Go get your children vaccinated.
Seriously.
And so I'm like, Rebel News. I thought, what? Let's see how their audience is looking at it. So I started scrolling down and reading the comments. I couldn't find a single positive comment towards their article. It was all against them, saying, what are you talking about?
Right.
So I don't think they've ever reported on us again after that, but they used our case to basically say, go get your children vaccinated. Actually, I don't think it said basically. I think that was the actual statement at the end.
Wow.
I can't remember who the reporter was. It was one of the more amateur reporters too. So we have that.
And they didn't promote our tour last year. They didn't promote our tour. The only thing they've ever talked to me about is uninformed consent. My film that went insane during COVID, right, about the vaccine.
Yeah. And
then I never heard from them again. I did a film right after that with Bobby Kennedy, and they didn't want to talk to me. So they have a serious agenda over there. Yeah, it's interesting. They're not rebels. Like, it should not be called that.
Right.
I do want to put a shout out to Odessa, because Odessa has supported both tours and has always supported my films. She wasn't just there for some of it; she's there for all of it, and she's been fantastic.
Odessa Orlowitz.
Odessa.
Great.
She's fantastic. But yeah, it's been pretty quiet in that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Winnipeg Alternative Media just did a podcast with us last night.
Yep.
Okay.
But that and then today here, but that's really what we're looking at.
I think Shadow Davis has reached out to us.
I don't know if
I heard that yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, someone talked to Shadow Davis yesterday.
So things are starting to get rolling, but it's been pretty silent. And so we were hoping the mainstream media, going back to anything negative.
Right.
Especially in Prince George. Prince George is terrible. There's still this thing, I don't know why, during the 2016, 2017, 2018, throughout that time, I was hated in Prince George, I think, more than I was anywhere else. And it was
Really?
largely based on their local media because it was incredibly dirty. In fact, one of the headlines was health store hosts deadly dad.
There's a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
That was
So
literally
that's
the
when you were
headline.
going to different health food stores, and then they were canceling on you,
Oh,
weren't they?
I got completely canceled. By the time that spring 2019 came around, I couldn't present anywhere in Canada without being stalked by the media and having them release an article saying, basically, you know, deadly dad, here he is. Yeah. So they basically they attempted to destroy my career.
Of course.
So when you take a look at that,
Yeah.
what were they actually attacking?
Right.
Our ability to bring our supplements to the market to help people avoid the woes of allopathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is anything getting canceled along this tour, or is everything been good so far?
It's been hard to find venues,
It
for
is.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people are afraid to show this film. Yeah. But we have been able to find venues everywhere, and it's been a lot of venues this time. Quite a few more, right, than last year?
Yeah, another 6 or 7. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
think we've got a total of 35 showings across the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's one big long tour.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
Good for you
Yeah, it's
guys.
fun.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, we're coming up on the halfway mark here pretty quick.
Already.
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
We started it on Vancouver Island in Courtney, and then went in Nanaimo, Victoria, over to Vancouver,
And
and on through
Coast to
BC
coast,
and on.
all the way.
We're stopping in Ottawa. Sorry, everybody. Past Ottawa.
Oh,
Yeah.
darn, you
Yeah.
guys. Oh,
Turn
that's
right
too
on.
bad. Okay. Well, there's big.
I have kids. He has kids. Like, you
Yeah.
know, being away from our families for 5 weeks. That's
That's a
not.
lot.
Yeah,
That's a lot. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And in any of the personal viewers, is it all positive
Oh,
feedback?
Awesome
Yeah.
feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how can, you know, Todd does an incredible job. An incredible job in telling story. And it's true to form. That's the amazing thing about it. He has a way of taking the truth and conveying it in a very emotionally compelling way that's backed up by the visuals as well. It's not just the information, but the B-roll, everything. They're top-notch films. I am thoroughly impressed. And this is coming from somebody that I was in it for 7 years doing video work. That's what I did. And you know, so I can appreciate what he's doing and the extra effort that's going into making this a really beautiful experience to watch these films.
Yeah. And if somebody can't come to a screening, how do they see?
It will be
film?
available eventually on matadorfilms.ca. So with all the other films that I've done from the time of kind of COVID arriving, that narrative arriving till now, they're all up on there. So
much fodder for.
Yeah, the corruption is never ending, and I get emails from people all the time. This is my story. Holy cow, this is my story. Yeah, and people like, you should look at this story. So there's no end of corruption to look at.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to say about
That's
it.
okay.
It's so obvious. It's
Okay.
Okay, so tell people about your products. Just so if people are looking for an alternative, maybe they're struggling mentally, maybe they're struggling just even because you don't have to have mental illness to take products.
No,
I take it every day, and I never had mental illness.
There you go. Well, you know, I have a
felt
story.
really good.
Yeah,
I'm feeling better now.
Well, that's the thing. You'll probably tap into parts of you that you don't even know.
Understanding that you need nutrition that, like, I didn't understand, and David taught me this. We're lacking in all this nutrition.
So much stuff.
You know, basically, I knew our food was devoid of it, but I thought maybe I just had a fantastic body. And but then he educated, you know, what now it's taken from my bones, blah 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 blah. I can let him speak to all that all day, but it's giving me what I need. Yeah, and that's awesome.
Oh yeah, the minerals are a big thing, just with what's being chelated out of the soils, and you know, and some things more than others. But I had one customer who had put her son on the True Hope, and he went from, and it wasn't for mental stuff, he went from one of the bottom players on his hockey team to one of the top.
Yep.
It changed his whole sports performance.
Yeah, and probably not just from physical, like you will see an increase in oxygenation of the blood, right? Right, as you're getting all these minerals that you need and all that, and you have proper functioning cells.
Yeah.
So you will see a physical increase in your performance, but also the mental acuity that takes place.
Yeah.
You can have somebody that's robust physically, but if their mind isn't there, they won't know how to use that body as well as they should. So it really brings everything into balance and makes it work synergistically together, right? So it's not just about enhancing mood and all that. It's about just enhancing the performance of the body overall
Right.
when you get the proper nutrition in.
And so you've got Empower Plus,
Yep.
the free aminos, iodine, the inositol.
Mhm.
What am I missing? Something else?
Olive leaf and the BMD, the bone health product.
Oh, okay.
And so, so basically, if we take a look at three of the products, they're comprehensive formulations, and the principles that apply to all of them, that's the Empower Plus, the free aminos, and the BMD, is first of all, we take a look at the combination of ingredients that are working synergistically together, and we make sure that we put them in those forms. So sometimes somebody's breaking it down per ingredient, saying, hey, what about that ingredient? That's not the best. Well, it's the best in conjunction with all the other ingredients, right? So we're looking at the whole of that, and we come to that understanding. And then they're going to look at it and say, okay, well, like, why do you have this ratio or whatever? Balance is the next thing. So we make sure that the ingredients are in the proper balance, and that's especially crucial when it comes to minerals. Calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, you need those in the proper balance.
Yeah.
Copper and zinc, same thing. You need those in the proper balance. So during COVID, actually, it was quite a disservice to a lot of people to be all of a sudden there's this big thing about zinc. Take zinc.
Exactly. They were over zinking themselves.
And when you over zinc yourself, you end up in a state of anxiety or agitation. But would they be able to determine that it was the zinc, or was it the circumstances that would naturally cause agitation and anxiety, right? So when you take it out of the balance with copper, which copper is also quite immune enhancing, so there's no reason to ever separate them out. But when you disassociate them and you over zinc, that's a bad thing, especially when it comes to mental health. So the zinc to copper balance needs to be maintained, and it's even better for your immune system because they're both bolstering the immune system. And so balance is crucial. So we have combination, we have balance, and then you got to make sure it's bioavailable, because it doesn't matter if it's great combination, great bioavailable, or a great balance, because it won't do a thing if it doesn't get into you. So that's when we micronize and we chelate the minerals, or with the amino acid product, it's different. We make sure that it's in its free form. So example, you consume protein, you're not consuming it for protein. Your body doesn't need to consume protein per se. It's consuming protein to break it down into the separate amino acids that then uptake into the bloodstream, and your body's going to choose what to do with it. It may take some of the amino acids and produce neurotransmitters and hormones. It may take some of the amino acids and turn them back into proteins for tissue development, right?
Yeah.
So it chooses, but it's the amino acids that you need. So protein digestion is a little bit onerous, and you don't get, like, if you consume 30 grams of protein, good luck absorbing 30 grams of amino acids into your bloodstream. It's not going to happen.
Well, most people have low stomach acid, right? They have low digestive fire.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And that's also due somewhat to mineral deficiencies and all that, because when you look at the production of enzymes and the activation of them, you need vitamins and minerals, right?
Yeah.
And so they're in their free form with the free form, or the free aminos. They're in their free form already broken down. So good digestion, not good digestion, doesn't really matter. They're already broken down. They don't need to be digested. They just absorb and go to work. So combination, balance, bioavailability applied to those three different formulas, and that's what allows for them to produce the therapeutic results that they do. Whereas you may look at something that looks similar and say, well, why isn't this helping people come off psychiatric medications?
Right.
Why isn't this correcting a significant bout of depression? Right? It looks the same, but it's not the same. And then our olive leaf extract. Olive leaf extract is phenomenal. Everyone should have olive leaf extract in their home. It's just a powerful herb. It's antiviral, antibacterial, antiparasitic, tremendous antioxidant, antifungal. That's what we actually use it for, is to knock back candida overgrowth and to help get people back to the point that they're digesting properly. So if candida overgrowth is a factor, likely the individual won't experience the benefits from the EMP like they should. And so we use it to help knock that back, and then tell them to go get onto a good protocol of replenishing their gut bacteria. And then the inositol, that's just a phenomenal thing that we've been using for the better part of 2 decades for helping with acute anxiety attacks. And because it has almost an immediate effect, right? So panic attack, anger, rage, anxiety. And so it became the replacement for Ativan. When somebody still had Ativan in their cupboard medicine cabinet, and they got triggered and they're on the Empire Plus, they're new to the Empire Plus, they haven't really stabilized a whole lot yet. You know, they go jump on the Ativan because, wow, they're triggered and they're revved up.
Yeah.
The inositol replaces that and does so in a great natural way. And so we utilize that, and we also utilize that as part of our thyroid protocols to help with things like Hashimoto's and Graves that we have a very rapid turnaround with as well, where we're able to correct those conditions quite quickly through the employment of our nascent iodine. We utilize that a little bit later on in the protocol because people with Graves and Hashimoto's don't tolerate iodine well. So we avoid using that initially, but we will introduce that later. But we start with the inositol. We introduce 400 micrograms of selenium and the Empire Plus, and we do that for about 3 weeks before they introduce the iodine, and their levels normalize very, very quickly.
So how do people learn about your protocols? Where do they get more info on the protocols? Because I always tell people if they're trying to get off psychiatric meds, I think you still have a number. Do you still have a call
We have a support
number?
center.
Yeah, there's a support system. I'm like, call these guys. They'll help you transition from one to the other and let you know how to do that. So, but how do they find out about all the other protocols that you have?
That's a fantastic question. We are very limited in what we can disseminate publicly.
Right.
Because of Health Canada.
Of course.
They've already
Yes.
come in late 2022, and we battled them out for about 6 months. And they made us take off the 35 medical journal publications off of our website. These are 35 medical journal publications coming from over 24 studies from universities around the world.
So people can't access those anymore.
They can.
Well, they just have to
They
go
have to
find.
find them on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's just a click and you can see it.
so they
It has nothing to do with them.
can't on the Canadian website.
Oh, okay. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Okay.
So it's pretty easy to find on the US.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that Health Canada doesn't have any jurisdiction over it. So that's the issue that we're encountering, is that we can only put out protocols and whatnot for public dissemination in ways that we're approved to do so. Otherwise, we'll have our licenses pulled. So they can contact us directly, and we are happy to supply them with our
Okay.
vast amount of experience in what we've found and guide them through that journey themselves.
Okay.
But yeah, Health Canada would not allow for us to put those protocols because a number of those products are not licensed for that application.
So if they want to connect with you directly, they go to.
They go to tropecanada.com and they can either phone the number on there or they can email us there, and we can then supply them with what they're looking for.
Come out to a show.
Come out to a
Yeah,
show,
that's a good
right?
way, yeah.
Come out to a show. Regardless, go out to a show. Go watch the other show.
Yeah.
It's just really important for. I mean, it's true history. This should be shown in schools.
Absolutely.
Right? This
Yeah,
should
without a
be documentaries. This is actual factual history
Mhm.
and history in the making and correcting the history that's been told.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
So it absolutely, if there's any schools, that would be a good thing to get
Wouldn't
to.
that be great?
Couldn't you? Well, maybe put it out there. You never know. So yeah, so if you have homeschool children, this could be part of the curriculum, right? My son doesn't go to school. My son has
Fantastic.
never been to school. So
That makes a few of us then.
what's that?
That makes a few.
Yes,
of us.
so I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine trying to fight that system.
Yeah.
The food, the indoctrination, the peer whatever, the inclusivity, the everything. It's just like no. So yeah, my son's now he's 16 and he's
Oh yeah.
never been, but I only have one. But yeah, so it'd be great curriculum for homeschooling because there's so many things involved there, right? There's like
Absolutely.
there's truth, there's history, there's like the system itself, and also compelling people like we got to own our lives. We got to own our lives. We have to take control of our health. We have to take control of where we get our news from, who we're supporting, how the person that we're being, what we're here for,
Mhm.
right? So many things.
So
So, okay. So I don't know. Is there
I think it's time to go take a
anything
nap.
else?
MatadorFilms.ca has the tour
Great.
schedule. TropeCanada.com has the tour schedule as well. Actually, I think even Trope.com has the tour schedule. We're really trying to get it out there so that
Awesome.
through multiple channels so that people are aware of where they can go to come to one of these viewings. And it's one of those viewings that you don't want to miss. I mean, it's really a community event that you keep on bringing
So
that up.
fun.
It is. It's
So you have the
just-
viewing and then you have like a town
Q&A,
hall thing
yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah, it's like a town hall.
Yeah.
We usually get thrown out of wherever we are because it goes so long.
Oh,
Yeah, it's totally a town hall. Yeah,
that's
it's nice. And
amazing.
people get to have a bit of a voice and ask some questions. And I've learned to keep learning a ton from David about nutrition and health, and that's fascinating stuff. The way our bodies work and
100%.
how it works with your mind and
Well,
yeah.
there is no separation. It is
Right.
one, right?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's the thing. And so
Amen.
It's the key. And when you own that, then you're not at the whim of those up there,
Absolutely.
right?
Mhm.
But and there's so many solutions in that, because if you support the right food, you support the right farming, you support, being a steward of the earth by supporting the right farmers, and like there's so much that can be healed through owning your health.
Mhm.
Yes. Yep, of course.
Got it.
All right.
Love it.
Nap time?
Okay. I gotta drive to Red Deer now.
No, that's P.
And that's not, trust me, I wouldn't do that right here. I do have an
I said
interview
that
on
yeah,
that
so you
though.
can cut that
But
part.
I have all about urine therapy. We've covered this topic
Okay.
already. This is humic and fulvic acid, trace minerals, and good quality unrefined salt.
Fantastic.
That's what that is right there. So
Yep.
minerals are my number one.
Nice.
My number one.
And
So,
it's basically the number one deficiency if you're looking at the four
Right.
classes of nutrients being vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and omega fatty acids that all work synergistically together. So
right.
you're filling in some big deficiencies that allow for your body to thrive.
100%. 100%. So that's that. Okay. Well, okay.
Awesome.
So twoharp.com, matadorfilms.ca. Anything else you want to say?
Throw down the mic.
Okay. That's it, guys. Share this. I don't know where this is gonna. I don't even know if it's gonna go on YouTube, because it's not gonna last a day on YouTube.
Well, there's always
We'll
Rumble.
try. We're on BitChute. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, anywhere. Share it. Share it on your own platforms, right? This is a conversation that needs to be said, because it's been so front and center, but so many people got the wrong side of the story. And we need to make it go international with the truth, not with the lie.
Okay.
So if you can support that, please do. And thanks for joining us. Until next time, ciao.